the Muslims are much better informed about Asia and are in regular contact with this part of the world. The only non-Christian peoples of whom Europeans have any considerable knowledge are Jews and Muslims. So, Christian Europe begins with very little intellectual equipment with which to cope with Africa or Asia or America. These are new worlds indeed for them. Another thing about this letter, do you notice how important the conversion motive is in it? Columbus is saying that Ferdinand and Isabella have sent him to find out how the newly reached lands may be brought to Christian faith. Now, of course, Columbus knew very well that there were other motives for his journey. It went without saying that India, Asia meant big business, and Columbus is a businessman. It goes without saying that this is going to be important commercially. But Columbus does think it's worth saying that the principal motive is the conversion of the peoples of outside Christendom. A lay businessman, that is, can say that the primary purpose of discovery is evangelization. Think now of your Christendom model. The whole way of Christian thinking is territorial. You have Christendom, the area where Christian law and custom are established, and there's heathen land where it isn't. So the overseas enterprise, which has now reached the Americas, and which in principle embraces Asia too, intends to bring these lands into Christendom. That's what evangelization means if your thought is territorial. You're going to establish Christian law and custom in lands where it does not yet exist. You've got to reproduce the society known in Europe in other parts of the world. You've got to extend Christian territory. You've got to get rid of idolatry, of blasphemy, of heresy. European Christendom is now to be extended across the rest of the world. Notice too that Columbus frames his commission from the Queen, King and Queen, between two striking events that marked Ferdinand and Isabella's reign. You notice how much space he gives to the victory over the Muslims that's broken 600 years Muslim rule in Spain. As I said, it wasn't actually true in 1492 when Columbus wrote this, but soon after 1500 it was clear that all Muslims had to convert or leave. There were going to be no Muslims left in Spain unless they accepted baptism. The other event is the order given to the Spanish Jewish community, as I said, much the largest group of Jews in Europe, that they must convert or leave, which again had been put into force in 1492. The Jews and Muslims of Spain, virtually the only exceptions to Christendom in Europe, who've been on pragmatic grounds left undisturbed for centuries, are now removed. The ideology of Christendom as Christian territory, you might say, is now complete. Both groups of unbelievers have been cleared from Christian territory, and it's been done by force. And that war against the Muslims had been seen as a crusade. It's the last and perhaps the most successful of the wars technically known as crusades. What I'm suggesting here is that what Columbus is envisaging is the extension of crusade to the rest of the non-Christian world. I saw the royal banners of your majesties planted on the Alhambra. The extension of Christendom had been the idea behind the crusade. The early crusades in the Middle East had failed or had produced very limited success. The most recent crusade in Spain had been highly successful. The extension of Christendom to the new lands is thus to be carried out by crusade. Because the only Christian experience that Europe had was territorial, and the only and the natural mode of promoting territorial Christianity is crusade. And the initial evangelization of Latin America, which is what we're just coming to, is by crusade, not by missions. The initial evangelization of Latin America is pre-missionary. It's the last crusade. The crusading method differs from the missionary method, and I hope before we close today we'll be able to consider how the missionary movement came into being. It isn't in being in 1492 when Columbus writes this letter, eager as he is for the conversion of the peoples of India. By this time, the 15th century, you had codified the ethics of crusade. you'd a code of practice for crusade based on the theory of just war. The dominant theory, and there were different theories, but the dominant theory was that you could use force to bring about conversion if other methods had failed. You should try other methods first, and incidentally, and I'm not sure we'll have time for this, other methods were tried, and most successfully in Africa. You get one part of Africa that enters Christendom voluntarily, the Congo Kingdom. And it would be nice if we could take a little look at the 250 years in which Congo was one of the states of Christendom. But where we are in Latin America, this question hardly applies. First, a just war could be undertaken if a people had refused all appeals and demonstrations. Now, Francis Vittoria, who's one of the founders of international law, laid down the principle in 1538 that war was justified if first native peoples provoked Spanish who were living peaceably among them, if they opposed the preaching of the gospel, if they sought to turn converts from the faith. If any of those three things happened, then it was legitimate to use force. It's an updating of the ideal of crusade for a new era. And it leaves many gates open for terrible abuse. So what you're going to attempt is what has already been done in southern Spain. Stamp out anything which is not Christian and require obedience to the faith. The new non-Western world was in fact going to show up the gaps in European intellectual equipment and the inadequacy of Western Christian theology.